Hey guys, so here's part 3 of the 2.8 notes. Now we're going to use the information we learned about multiplicity and end behavior to actually sketch graphs of polynomials. Now there's one more thing that I do want to talk about before we get into the sketching, is the idea about turning points of a polynomial function. So let's say we have a polynomial function of degree n. Then the graph has at most n minus 1 turning points, okay? So what does this mean? Well, let's say if we have a degree of 4, well, that means our turning points, at most, we would have 3. So you take your degree, subtract it from 1, and that tells you how many turning points. Now let's talk about what is the turning point. Well, that's going to be your local maximum and local minimums. So they occur at the y-coordinate of our turning point. So let's say we have just this little graph here. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. Here, as we can tell, that would be our local max. And then here would be called a local min. And so basically a turning point is a point in which the graph goes from either increasing to decreasing or decreasing to increasing. So those 2 points that I label are local max and local min, they are also called our turning points. So basically our graph switches from either the increasing to decreasing or decreasing from increasing. So that's just a little bit more information about when we sketch. You might see some local min and maximums there. Okay, now let's go ahead and get into the sketching. So in order to sketch, we have to figure out a lot of information. One is to figure out the degree and the leading coefficient. Then we need to figure out which way do our arrows go. From there, then we need to figure out the x-intercepts and then their multiplicity and then what happens. So let's start off with this. We have f of x equals 1/6 times x plus 3 times x minus 2 cubed. Now notice we are in intercept slash factored form. So remember, to find the degree, we add the exponents. So don't get this confused when we are in standard form. When we are in standard form, whatever the highest exponent is, that is going to be our degree. But in factored or intercept form, we count the exponents. Now notice on the x plus 3, we don't see a number. Whenever you don't see a number, that is automatically 1 as our exponent. So for our degree here, we have 3 plus 1, because 3 is an exponent and 1 is an exponent, so that gives us 4. So in this case, our degree is even. Now let's look at our leading coefficient. Remember, that's going to be the number in front of our parentheses. So here we have a 1/6. That is our a value and our leading coefficient. Notice that it is positive. So when we sketch, which way will our arrows face? Well, remember with even degrees that the arrows go both the same way. Think about a quadratic or a parabola. They go the same way. Now with positive, that means it is going to open up. So our arrows are going to face up here. Okay? So when we graph, we want our arrows to face up. Now, from there, let's talk about our x-intercepts. So remember, to figure out the x-intercepts, we take our parentheses, the factors, and we set them equal to 0. So I'm going to take my x plus 3, set that equal to 0, and my x minus 2, set that equal to 0. Now I solve for x, so I get x equals -3 and x equals 2. Now let's figure out the multiplicity here. So we're going to number or figure out the number of the multiplicity. Let's look at the factor. So anytime you need to figure out the multiplicity, you look at the factor. On the x plus 3, our exponent is 1. Now notice, because our exponent is 1, that means we have an odd, I'm going to put this, odd multiplicity. And so therefore, we are going to cross at the x value of -3. Now for x minus 2, notice that we also have an odd degree there. So our multiplicity was 3, which is odd. So we will also cross at that x value. Okay? So using all of this information, I'm now going to go ahead and sketch my graph. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and plot my x-intercept. So I have it at -3, and I have it at 2. Okay. So from there, now I'm going to go ahead, my arrows should both be facing up. Now I'm going to connect everything. So at -3, I go ahead and I cross, whoops, okay? And then from there, I need to make sure I cross once again at my x equals 2. Okay. And boom. Now you could have, if you wanted to create something, notice that since our degree is 4, our turning points, at most we could have 3 turning points, okay? So this is how we could sketch our graph if we need to, with all the given information. Okay, let's go ahead and do the next one. Okay, now here we have -x³ times x plus 6 to the 6 times x plus 1. So we're going to do the same thing. So we need to figure out our degree and our leading coefficient. Remember, for degree, we're going to count the exponents, okay? Now notice here, we do have 3, 6, and then on this x plus 1, that's going to be a 1. So we do 3 plus 6 plus 1. So that's 6, 7, 8, or sorry, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So our degree is 10, meaning it's even. And then our leading coefficient. Notice it's a negative in front of our x³, right? So that's going to be a -1. And so that is negative. So what happens with our arrows when we have, once again, an even and a negative leading coefficient? Well, even means they go the same direction, and with the negative, that means this graph is going to open down. Okay, now we want to figure out the x-intercepts. Okay, here we have 3. So now what we need to do is this one that we have, that is x³, that is going to be an x-intercept. So we are going to set that equal to 0. So I have x equals 0. Then my x plus 6, I'm going to set that equal to 0. Now if you want to, you can also do it in a way of -x³ equals 0, and we can solve for that, okay? So it is a possibility. So we can divide both sides by -1. So I get x³ equals 0, and then I take the cube root on both sides. No, anytime you take a root of 0, that's just going to give you 0, okay? So there you can automatically tell it's going to be 0 no matter what, because we don't have any other number with it. Now, x plus 6, I set that equal to 0, and I get x equals to -6. And then my x plus 1, same thing. So then I get x equals to -1. Sorry, x plus 1 equals to 0, and that's how I get it. Okay, now lastly, we need to talk about the multiplicity. So on the x³, notice the exponent is 3. That is odd, so we will cross. On the factor of x plus 6, notice that we have, and I'm going to erase some of this here so you can see. There you go. So notice that we do have an exponent of 6. So that is even, so we are going to bounce, or another term is touch, okay, our x-intercept. And then at the factor of x plus 1, that multiplicity is 1. Okay, so since that multiplicity is odd, we are once again going to cross. Okay, now let's go ahead, we're going to plot our x-intercepts. So we have it at 0. We have it at -6 and -1. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, so now our arrows are going to be facing down. So we start down, okay? So at -6, I'm going to bounce. Now I did show you an example of what it could look like bouncing-wise if we go this way. So we hit the x equals -6 and we come straight down. That's what a bounce is, okay? Now at -1, x equals -1, we are going to cross. So now just kind of, you need to come back up so we can cross. Now, does it really matter how low this little spot is? No. That's why we call this sketching, because we're not really graphing this exactly. So all it matters is that you plot your x-intercepts correctly, you have the correct x-intercepts, your end behavior or the arrows are facing the correct direction, and you're either bouncing or crossing at the correct x-intercepts, okay? That is all that matters. So you could have had this little part all the way down, or you could have just had it a little bit. It is up to you. Now, at x equals -1, we cross. Now, I need to come back down again because at 0, I'm going to cross as well. So I come back down to 0, and there's no more x-intercepts. And remember, on our other arrow, we go down as well. So the graph could look something like this. But all I care are about the x-intercepts, your end behavior, which are the arrows, and that you're crossing and bouncing correctly. Okay, we have one more example I would like you to try. So what I would like you to do is go ahead and pause the video and try this on your own. Okay, let's see what you got here. So first, let's talk about the degree of this polynomial. Okay, so remember, since we are in factored intercept form, we need to count the exponents. So on the x plus 10, notice we don't have an exponent here. That is an automatic 1. So we have a 2 plus 4, and then a plus 1. So we get 7 as our degree. Now the leading coefficient. Remember, that is going to be the number in front of our parentheses. Here we have a -1. So 7 was odd, correct? And then our -1, that means it's negative. So let's think about this, because we haven't done a lot with our odds here. Remember, odds, the arrows go in different directions. Think about a linear. Which way does this go when we have a linear? Well, if it's an odd and negative, that means when our x values are getting smaller, going towards negative infinity, that means our arrow is going up. But when we are going towards positive infinity on our x, then our y values become negative. Okay, so we have a down or up-down arrow here. Okay, now the next thing we need to figure out are the x-intercepts. So remember, to figure out the x-intercepts, take each of your factors, set it equal to 0. So I have x minus 2, then I have x plus 4, and then x plus 1. So I get x equals 2, x equals -4, and x equals -1. Now, our last thing, we need to talk about multiplicity. So this is looking at the exponents on these factors. So we look at the exponents on these factors. On the x minus 2 factor, notice that we get 2 as our exponent there. So since our 2 is even, that means we're going to bounce. Okay, and x equals -4, notice our multiplicity there is 4, because that's the exponent. And notice, once again, that's an even multiplicity, so we bounce. And then at x equals, whoops, that should be 10, excuse me. That's my fault there. So we have x plus 10 equals 0, so we get x equals -10 as our x-intercept. At x equals, or x plus 10, that has an exponent of 1, so that's our multiplicity. Since that's odd, that means we are going to cross at the x value of -10. Okay, let's go ahead and plot our x-intercepts. So we have -10, then we have -4, and then 2. Okay, now remember our arrows. We, on the left-hand side, go ahead and start up, and at -10, we're going to cross there. So I'm going to cross. Now, at -4, I'm going to go ahead and bounce. In order to bounce, I need to come up. I'm going to hit that x-intercept, and I'm going to come right back down, okay? Now, from there, I'm going to once again bounce at 2. So in order to do that, I need to come back up, hit x equals 2, and then come right back down. And so my arrow's going down, and my arrow's going up. And did I do this correctly? Yes, because I can notice that I should have an up and down arrow, and there's 2 bounce and 1 cross. Okay, if you guys have any questions, make sure you contact me and make sure you work on the homework assignment. See you guys later.